Um, I will. Good morning, everyone. The time is now 10:13. Thank you for joining us and today's Civilian Review Board Public Meeting. My name is Daniel Harold, and I am the chair of the CRB. As a note, this meeting is open for the public to attend and is being recorded through Zoom. Zoom has been set up for video recording purposes only and is not an option for public. And there is not an option for public participation at this time. If anyone needs a transcript of the meeting afterwards, please reach out to OPAT staff at opatboards@boston.gov. Public comment will not be held during this meeting. You are welcome to submit any comments that you have to opatboards@boston.gov, and they will be acknowledged at the next OPAT Commission community meeting. I'm now going to take attendance of all the CRB members who are present for this meeting. When you hear your name, please audibly acknowledge that you are present.
You have an attendance sheet.
What?
You have an attendance sheet.
I do.
Should say where it's an enter executive session.
Got it.
All right, so I should put it in the.
Amari Perez.
Present.
Bernard Fitzgerald.
Here.
I'm so sorry.
You got
Theofort Lorising.
present.
Joshua Dankon.
Here.
Natalie Carithers. Not here. Peter Alvarez.
Here.
Reginald Smalls.
Here.
Denisha De Leon.
Is on her way.
I'll put a note that she is coming. Great. So this morning, we will run through the agenda that you can see on the screen. We also have a copy of it in our books. And each board has a member has a copy of the agenda in their binder. And so our first order of business today is to approve the meetings for the minutes for the last meeting, CRB's March 27th meeting. Has anybody noticed any corrections that need to be made to the last meeting's minutes? Mr. Smalls?
I see the date for November 20th, 2025.
Okay.
So that should probably be 2024.
Paying attention. Love that.
Can you say that one more time?
Where is
I'm
that?
sorry, the second paragraph.
Yep.
That's what Chair Harold opened the executive session. The date that the meeting was held for the minutes from the CRB meeting held on November 20th, 2025.
Right.
Should be November 20th, 2024.
2024.
Those are the executive session meeting minutes. I think we're looking at the public meeting minutes now because the executive
Right in front
session.
of-
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
There's one right
But
before.
that will be one that
Yeah,
needs to be
we'll
fixed. Yeah.
Just make sure we're looking at the right one. The same document.
You're right, thank you.
That's all right.
Just about I guess the public meeting minutes. Has anybody else noticed anything that needs to be corrected?
No, but I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
As of today, those minutes will be approved. So now we're going to move on to Executive Director's report. The chair acknowledges Executive Director Avandro Carvalho to present this report to the CRB.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Avandro Carvalho. I have the distinct pleasure and honor of being the Executive Director of OPAT. Thank you for being here. This is our second meeting of 2025. Very excited to welcome all of you back. Many of you anew. Excited to have you in your second meeting. I want to welcome the new member who's first time attendance, Mr. Bernard Fitzgerald. Thank you for being here. Certainly want to welcome back our former chair, Mr. Peter Alvarez. Having said that, obviously, you know, there's a lot of work that we do on a day-to-day basis, but I want to just highlight a few things so we can get to some of the work that's in the agenda, which I find that we have obviously a very full agenda for today, with several cases, up-to-date cases. Also, we're going to be obviously discussing the policy subcommittee. So happy to just give you some highlights and then we'll move on, okay? And the first and foremost, I think you should know, last week I attended, myself, actually, Cheyenne attended, and a few other staff members attended a budget hearing in front of the city council. It's the annual budget hearing with the Ways and Means Committee. We presented the overview of the work that we do. We answered questions, and generally the city councils were very supportive of the work that we do. I went through a thorough sort of presentation of slides, because many of them, to be honest, do not know the work that we do. So I spent time sort of explaining some of that work, both board CRB and IOP and such. And again, they expressed they were all very supportive of the work that we do. We were recommended budget by the mayor for us, essentially, which is what she's doing throughout the city, which is trying to be level funded, which, as you all, I'm sure, have been paying attention in terms of the pressure that we're feeling as a city from the federal government with the cuts. So we're trying to, so there were not significant investments put forth by the mayor, period, right? So our budget will be leveled. Again, the request, at least recommended from the mayor, is $1,472,000, which is again approximately about 1.5 million, which primarily focuses on our staff personnel, and which is somewhat pretty much what we had last year, which is again what I'm saying is level funded and maintenance fund. A couple of things about beyond the budget that I want to discuss. As I said in the past, I continue to focus on building capacity of the agency. And unfortunately, as we're loading people, bringing new people to the space, we are unfortunately losing people at the same time. So it's been tough to have cadence of a small group. And on that note, we did lose one of our investigators, Tashley Reed, who was one of the original investigators for OPAC. He moved to another opportunity within the state, and I think he left a couple of weeks ago. Excited to obviously for his future and thank him for his service. And for that, because of that, we have two openings in the investigation team, two investigators, and we have publicized those positions. In fact, I think we've got close to 100 people that applied. So if you know anyone, right now we're down to obviously one investigator. We'll have two openings. And go ahead.
What's the qualification, like high
We are
school or
looking for people with, minimum of 3 or 4 years of experience of doing investigations. Because obviously, that matters in the space. We are getting people that don't have that, but we have got significant amount of people that meet that criteria. But right now, particularly where we are as an office, I am certainly focusing on the individuals. But anyone, particularly with the investigation in law enforcement, or people in parole, for probation, folks in fraud-related spaces, right? That investigate, sort of enforcement. And hopefully, in fact, we even have, which I think could be helpful. We have former law enforcement of schools that have applied. So this is just generally thinking about some of the resumes I've seen that I thought were very helpful. But on that note, again, but at the same time, we are onboarding people. We are hiring, as you notice, coming into the front. We haven't had someone sit up front in quite some time, so we are hiring individuals to be the next administrative assistant for OPAC. His name is Mario Bozil. He will start Monday, and we'll get an opportunity to meet him at the next meeting. Couple other things, we continue to do community engagement on a regular basis with our open door days that we have in the office every first Wednesday of the month. We also do every other Friday, we do coffee hours throughout the neighborhoods that city of Boston. I think coming up, we're going to be in Hyde Park, we're going to be in various neighborhoods. So happy to have you come to some of those as well, to engage with us and the folks in the community. And most importantly, we had our first OPAC commission meeting, which, I'm not sure if I explained this last time, but within our infrastructure, we have the CRB board, we have the IOP board, and each chair of the boards, including obviously, Cindy here and myself, the three of us make up the OPAC commission. And that commission is required to also do public meetings. Unlike this space, which is a hearing, folks in the case, that's more public meetings to talk and inform the public about what we do and listen to them. It was very well, I think it was very well executed. People, engaged us, asked questions and so on. In fact, we just took a place up the street on Golden Building. We are going to have, again, these meetings, going to try to move them to other parts of the city, so it's not going to be the OPAC. So look out for that coming up again in the future. I think I mentioned the coffee hours, a couple more things perhaps that I have here. Obviously the mayor is starting the coffee hours as well that, I attended one, and I know community engagement individual, Abdullah is attending many of those. We go to task force meetings, particular safety task force meetings. So if you know any meetings in your neighborhoods that you think could be fruitful for us to attend, let us know. But having said that, I think, I'm taking it down a long time that I wanted to, but wanted to just give you a brief overview in terms of some of the work that we're doing. Obviously, we're taking on cases on a regular basis and putting on cases. I'm excited that we have a strong list of cases to put to the board because as I'm sure you've seen, in the papers, perhaps, board efficiency in getting cases through the board has been one of the things that we need to lift up and do that. So I'm excited that we got a full group that particularly this meeting being well attended. Looking forward to doing more with all of you. And that's it from me. Again, thank you for being here. Looking forward to this meeting.
Thank you, Director Carvalho. Does the board have any other questions about this report?
I have a question, not specifically about the report. I'm just curious if the BPD commissioner has responded to any of the
Yes, I
CRB's
think I know what you're talking about.
more
This
recent
we met?
recommendations for discipline.
Since we met?
Yeah,
Yeah, there has not been a response. I will say a lot for this movement towards the positive. In fact, this morning I was on the phone with the new, actually that should have been a big for you all as well. BPD commissioner appointed the new superintendent, and I forget the exact title, but he oversees IAD essentially. And you may have seen when the person in the past was Owens, who was just made chief of police. So essentially second in command. We got this gentleman by the name of Rich Daly, who actually I've worked with in the past, and he is very familiar with the office, who was recently appointed. So he and I, and Esther, who's our new deputy director, who I introduced last time, we'll have a meeting with him and his deputy to kind of walk through some of those gaps, particularly around recommendations that we made in the past. And to be honest, I know you're aware, Josh, around some of the investigation, sort of protocols and barriers as well. So I'm looking forward to working with them. And I think, particularly now that he's in that place and Esther's supporting in this space, we should be able to move on that space. So thanks for your. So,
is there a time frame that he should look at it, or is it just kind of?
good question. He and I, two things to answer that. One, there isn't. One, because there's none yet articulated in our ordinance.
Right.
But the commission, this is one of the topics that we're gonna be looking at, right, to give them a space. Maybe it's 30 days, maybe 45 days, maybe it's 2 weeks out. What, how often should it be applied to us? So that's one of the things that hopefully we can codify through regulations, so he knows, because that came up with in a discussion between the commission and I in the past. And it's not clear. It does say that it gives a timeline of when we're supposed to develop the, the reports, but it does not say. It's silent in terms of when we're supposed to reply.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, we fell out of cadence for many different reasons in terms of those responses. But based on the conversation I had with them, and I think again, the new superintendent, I think we're gonna be able to drive that work, and ultimately, along with many of the things that needs to be codified in terms of our regulations, subpoena, and all these different things. This would be one of the topics that we can address. Make sense?
Yep.
Would there be also opportunities to it's a new appointee to meet when the OPAT commission is meeting.
That's
This is a
an
private
excellent
meeting,
question.
so-
I actually, to be honest, what I've been focusing on and I think we can do is get the commission himself to the meeting, to one of the meetings with the commission. So I think, you know, obviously in that same vein, perhaps the move superintendent can attend meetings as well. But one of my goals, to be honest, is just try to have both the mayor and the commission of PPD, and at least one of the OPAC commission. So, thanks for that. Anything else? Great questions, by the way. I appreciate it.
So, if there are no more questions, our next agenda item is the complaint summary and disposition. So the CRB will review the cases listed on the agenda in an executive session. If anyone would like to make a motion, enter executive session.
Chairman, I think though, we were going to do the subcommittee discussion first. I'm not sure.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so at least in the agenda, that's first. And then we'll get into the cases. Obviously, kind of frame that discussion. I know some of the board members, a couple of the board members were not present last meeting, and it should be in the minutes. The CRB voted to have a subcommittee to obviously make policy recommendations. And the work, thanks to Josh, Josh, has been sort of pushing. Thank you for your efforts in that space. We were able to vote on that, and in between that meeting and now, and actually shared, we should see in the binder, I shared the draft that you did, Josh. I'm not sure.
It should be behind, in your front pocket. In the front pocket behind your notebooks.
And then I sort of, Josh and I met in intro, and sort of just discussed some things. And since then I came up with some sort of guiding principle around, I think, what we can do as well. So it's up to you to sort of, you know, hopefully again, acquaint yourself with his draft and just kind of look at what I suggested. And then we'll see where we settle in terms of next steps for the subcommittee. But mine, again, is just designed as a guiding principles in terms of, you know, operationalizing things for us for the subcommittee.
And is this something that we want to vote on today?
You know, it's up to you. I think obviously we should have a discussion. You know, we should have a discussion. I think part of it for me was that last time we voted on it, but there was like sort of an in-depth discussion, particularly from other members in this and what this means. We didn't have particularly the draft, if I'm correctly, discuss the draft, you know, that Josh had done. So I wanted to have that discussion and then sort of move on.
Do we give people a minute to read through
Yeah.
this, and then, if it's helpful, Chair, I'm happy to give my perspective,
Yeah, that'd be great.
but, people want to read through first. Behind the yellow, thing.
The
in your
notebook, yeah.
Oh,
Doesn't have
here, I'm familiar.
Thank you.
We'll look on the computer. Maybe there's an extra one of these as well. That we can
I
use.
should have, everybody should have it, but I'm happy
I
to.
think there's one missing, or maybe, is there one in the extra binder there?
Which one am I looking for?
Great, thank you. We got it now.
You got it, you're good.
Thank you.
Would it be helpful for me to
Yeah, I think,
give my perspective?
thank Mr. Dankoff.
Thanks. So first of all, you'll see that this is dated March of 2024, so some of the things here are a little out of date. But that's okay. I think it's for us to make things up to date and make this work for us. The ordinance that creates OPAT and creates the CRB has a list of things that are responsibilities of CRB or powers and duties rather. And one of those is to provide timely review of existing or proposed BPD policies and procedures and provide recommendations for the revisions of those policies and procedures to the police commissioner. To date, we haven't done that. And so the idea here was to create a policy subcommittee of this body that would, between the meetings, meet, review, decide which policy was going to be reviewed, review it, and then bring those recommendations back to the CRB to then vote on and then move forward. Just acknowledging that we usually take the time in these meetings to talk about the cases, and we want to prioritize that. So the idea of this policy subcommittee was just to have space for those who wanted to talk about that to do that. I proposed a timeline here, but it doesn't have to be like this. The general idea was that each quarter there would be one policy that would be agreed on and that the policy subcommittee would review. And then this sort of creates a timeline to getting to the policy subcommittee receiving what's the current policy, to them reviewing it, the meeting, and then a timeline to get those recommendations back to this committee. And this is, yeah, and the part that's definitely out of date is the proposed initial subcommittee members. One thing that we talked about in the last meeting, if my memory serves me correctly, that I was interested in being on the policy subcommittee. I think Tanisha had expressed interest, and Reverend Smalls, and I didn't remember Amari had expressed interest. And Peter, did you just raise your hand?
No, I didn't.
Okay, then thank you for clarifying.
Very quick.
I'm also interested.
Oh, and Sam and the chair. So, yeah, but this other document from OPAT is a draft and for our consideration.
Do you need 5 members? I mean, I think like CRB being 9 members, I think 5 members feels like more than half. It feels like a lot of people. I think if you have 4 or 3, that's just my view. Like, I think it makes it easier, because you got to have meeting rules, a quorum. You have to have at least like, I think when you have 4, I almost think 3 makes sense, because if you have 4, you may not have a quorum with 2 people. Whereas if you have 3, you have a quorum with 2 people.
Suggestion 3, right?
I had suggested 3.
Yeah, I just
But
want
we
to.
have interest from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So
I think you can have it like 3 people is the meetings, and then like other people are ex parte members. Like people can be. CRB members can be in the board meetings, like as ex parte members, they participate, they can give feedback, but there's 3 voting members. I just don't want you to get into an issue with like quorum, like because 4 people, 2 people can't make it. There's a lot of meetings. Chair is one of the people, like the chair will have meetings, like commission meetings and follow-up meetings. I just want to make sure and I would think like chair, maybe like you would be the like ex parte member. So like chairs are usually ex parte members. I'm just saying like in terms of.
I wasn't familiar with the rules about ex parte members.
Yeah, like, what is that called? Not ex officio, not ex parte, like non-voting member of something, like, so like on subcommittees of boards, like chairs always join those meetings, but they're not the ones that like vote on them.
I mean, I think it's kind of up to us.
Yeah, you guys can decide. I just throwing ideas out there.
So just as my pitch is that I would love to be part of this, just as somebody who's in that space a lot. I feel like I have a lot of issues with a lot of these things, and I feel like I have specific ideas that I'd be interested in pursuing. But I also want to give space to people who are interested. So I don't know. Ms. De Leon, I felt like you were about to say something.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say, with that being said, I feel like out of everybody, I'm like I'm supportive of the idea, but if there's too many people, happy to step down. I'm on the boat of just like, I understand that there's a lot of work to be done, so I feel like there should just be a plan and, yeah. There needs to be more space. I'm willing to step down.
Great, so
I was gonna say, I was love the, you mentioned a point that is very important just to have forum. I would
Mhm.
definitely say this, so 5 members would be ideal for this. Subcommittee, we're going to do, because if we miss 1 or 2, so we can still work with 3. I would say 5 member, I would recommend that. If we can 5 member willing to do so, let's create it this way.
yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, it's 5.
I mean, look, we created with 5 because we have 5 interested right now. And then, say that quorum is 3 of the 5.
Yeah,
You just think it's hard to get.
that's tough. I think you can have 5 members on the subcommittee. You can have 5 members on the subcommittee. I think you should have only 3 voting members and you guys decide who that is. And the work of the subcommittee would involve all 5 people, but you only need 2 people for a quorum. So like all 5 people get notice of the meetings, anything, and then the other 2 are ex officio, like they're not voting, but they're non-voting members of the subcommittee. I just don't think 5 voting members makes sense, where if you have 3 people, if you have 2 people ready to work, and they can fill the date, like people's calendars get filled, things happen, this is an aggressive timeline. You wanna be able to push the work forward and have a quorum, and like you're going to miss quorum, I will tell you. With 5 person where you need 3 people all the time, you are going to miss quorum or have reschedulings and schedulings, it's gonna be tough.
One thing that is maybe easier for the subcommittee, potentially easier for subcommittee than this group, is that we wouldn't necessarily be looking at confidential personnel records and could meet on Zoom. Right? The policies, existing policies, certainly reviewing existing policies, those are already public facing. There's nothing that says, and my understanding in a previous conversation, that we would be subject to public meeting law. So we just notice it, or either have it hybrid or be on Zoom.
You'd like 5 voting members where 3 members are quorum, you don't like the idea of 2 non-voting members?
I just don't want to choose which 3 are the folks who are going to be the voting members, and that's the only thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a problem that's a good problem to have, that there's 5 people
Yep,
that are willing, and I mean, I think you'd probably have 2 people be like, I don't need to vote, I just want to participate. I would think like,
And I'm fine being one of the non-voting members if that's
Yeah.
needed, so.
yeah, I just think like, I want to
I-
make as much flexibility to move the ball forward for people.
Yeah.
And
The
I
other
think
thing, too,
5
is
is
that,
aggressive.
2 things, and I don't know the answer to this, right, but I think having 5 people out of 9 could potentially be an issue with it being more than half of the people involved. You know, in terms of having 4, right, because that's sort of more than half of the 9, that's more than half of the people. So I have to look up what that implication could be, to have a subcommittee that's sort of more than half of
The voting members, you could be discussing things. yeah,
Right,
like,
right, so
things
there's
like
that, right? Because you know, you only could have 6 members to have a decision made, right? So. And then the other thing is that I really would not want to trigger public notice, because now now we got the war in terms of notifying people and pulling it out, people are not coming in, so this is, I think, which is why I came up with my sort of suggestions. I'm trying to have this as informal as possible, and anytime you trigger, a public notice, that becomes more work. And I'm not hiding from work, but, we do have limited capacity right now. And I think infrastructure wise, this is designed again to be informal, but we're not really triggering the formal process that we have to do.
So there is no meeting.
No, there is meeting, but when you have, again, like just as I was explaining to you before, like sending email to 5 people. Right, to discuss, a matter that's within your jurisdiction, right, that triggers me, right, so I'm just sort of thinking out loud, I don't have the answer, particularly around 5,
Yeah.
because we were thinking more 3, but that triggers stuff in my mind that I need to sort of do more due diligence, right, in terms of executing something like this with more than half of the board.
Is there a place, sorry to interject, but is there a place So where do we get this information about what triggers?
Open meeting laws are primarily in this space. That's enforced by the Attorney General's office. They have a guidance. I've read it, but I did not see, and I think actually that might be in your binder. But this is a nuanced space that I didn't necessarily see or thought about in terms of having, you know, having this discussion. So,
Well, what if we do this? What if we have three members? Anybody can, like, we can have ex officio members appear, and between now and the next CRB meeting, we can discuss maybe adding members if it looks like that would be in keeping with the public meeting laws. But just to sort of get the ball rolling, we can have three members.
That's fine with me, and,
the other thing we could do too is have, you know, people for 9 months, 6 months, and then sort of have everybody have the benefit of being on that subcommittee. So I think could be helpful.
sure.
So, you know, so you could have three now, you know, and then maybe in 6 months, rotate one person out, right? You know, I don't.
I guess my question is, what is needed from the OPAT side? Like, what is needed for us to say, all right, we want to decide today, what are the first policies we want to work on? And we want to set a meeting date 6 weeks from today. If that's our goal, what is needed to actually make that happen from the OPAT side? Because from the CRE side, I think we can make it happen.
I'm just saying, there's the you know, charge to execute this, right?
Yeah.
I have to sort of, like, if I have, like, as I just raised a couple of things, right? If I don't have the answer right now, I don't, because I didn't anticipate sort of this angle of 5 people, right? So I have to go do further due diligence. So I can't provide you with the exact answer, particularly because you had suggested 3. I thought we were going 3, now we're at 5. So I'm just thinking on the spot, so I can't tell you that, right? But I could, you know, hopefully right away look into it and try to find an answer. But I can't provide you the answer that you're looking for right now. But but if you have a subcommittee, right, that you want to execute,
Right, so the concern is if it's 5, any communication that is substantive would need to be, would be considered a meeting. And if it's fewer than 5.
Right, so like you sort of, you're brushing in that space that is great for me, because I don't have that understanding right now. Whether that impacts, well, how much that impacts, you know. The work, right? So that's why I can't provide you that answer. But I think, you know, if we, as I suggested, we kind of just perhaps move on from that one space we are in. Right now, you know, which is why I sort of was saying in my space, in my document, you know, that perhaps we sort of start, you know, with 3. I know everybody wants to be in, but we start with 3, and then we sort of, you know, today select, to kind of go to your question, select, you know, policy interests that everybody's interested in, like 5, right, that we can start drawing from. And then we have, you know, OPAT staff, Michael's here, start looking into some of these things and pulling out what policy issues you want to look at, and sort of then submit it to the subcommittee, right, for like, okay, we're gonna move with this because this looks this way, do some research, and then sort of land somewhere, right? Where you sort of, you know, hopefully again, we, by the end of the year, as I said here, have 2 recommendations that are solid and put it through, right? So because again, I haven't been able to execute this, so I'm just flagging everything. I'm trying to figure out how to simplify it so we can do something, and then 6 months, reconsider this work this way, this work this not way. You know, add more members, take away more members, then we can kind of.
In the interest of moving forward and recognizing the graciousness with which both Ms. DeLeon and Mr. Smalls offered to be non-voting members, can I propose that we move forward with 3 members for now? And that those 3 members be, based on what we said, myself, the chair, and Mr. Perez. And then we'll revisit and have this open. Just and Mr. Carlano, could you look into this question of what would it look like? What could we do a 5-person subcommittee? Like, would that in fact trigger the public notice?
So hearing what Mr. Dankoff has to say, does anybody second his motion?
Second.
Okay. Should we vote, or do we want to?
3-person.
Did you want to?
You want to talk about the possible areas?
Right, and I thought that perhaps, again,
We made a list of these ones.
the space.
Well, you probably could, you could vote on the that's the first decision everyone can make right now, it's a three-person voting.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and then talk about the policy priorities, yeah. And,
Right, right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So vote on that and then talk about the law.
Yeah.
Good point. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so, can we get a vote for, Mr. Perez, myself, and Mr. Gancock being the three-person subcommittee body? I vote
Voice
yes.
vote.
yeah, in favor.
Looks like we
Yes.
have a unanimous
Yeah.
vote
And two non-voting, right?
and two. Oh, the ex officio members?
Yeah, like,
I think that we wanna.
it's about the five, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that-
they answer
That's-
about
let's
five
keep
no
it
matter
three.
what, yeah,
Let's stick
yeah.
with three for now, but if we get an update and then we can
That will be
figure out a
for
way to
two
do it.
non-voting, because it
Yeah.
is the meeting part of five people, yeah, you're right, that we need to explore, okay.
Okay,
With that being said, so if there are things around policy and procedures that we want to bring up in this meeting, are we able to do that?
Absolutely.
So-
Okay,
absolutely.
great.
And that's, you know.
Let's do that right now.
Yes. let's do that.
Great.
Yes, so now, like, we're thinking about potential policy priorities. I am looking at, the draft that OPAT, submitted with the various BPD rules and procedures. I think, if we're just talking about the priorities, I think that's a major one. Are there anything, is there any of these other or ideas that people might have independently of these policy priorities that they're interested in having the subcommittee review?
I think the officer participation in OPAT process, just because that's been kind of a trend, a negative trend. There were more participation earlier, but I think once we had some sustained recommendations, the participation kind of eased and kind of stopped.
Yeah,
So thinking of ways to compel, I mean, there is a way to compel people to come, there's subpoena power within the commission, but like that should be used only in certain circumstances, like there needs to be some kind of collaboration where they participate in some way. Even on things that were like, obnoxious, like maybe there was no there, but we probably need to work on a policy between BPD and OPAT on participation in the investigation.
I agree with that.
And making that like, a collaborative process. I think that's one that's really, I mean, it's very relevant to the work that the office is doing, and it's something that like, based on, I think one of the best things in terms of the priorities and is like, what are the things that we've, like being able to speak to the things we've seen or the trends we've already seen in cases. And I think that's like one of the main things we've seen in cases, like the officers were participating, then they stopped in the investigations. So like, that's something we probably need to address.
I agree with that. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that issue?
Is that an issue for the union?
It's not necessarily because like they were participating, so it wasn't like, it basically, I will say where the union does, it is kind of a union issue is, from my understanding is, they're not paid to come, like that their officers aren't, like basically if they're on the clock, they're not saying, oh, that's like work time, like when they go to court, they get paid for that. When they come to this investigation, it's like, it's a gray area, and so in keeping the gray area, I think it's easy, I think it's discretionary authority, whoever's their boss, but I think like there's that gray area. Is that kind of one thing that's been mentioned? I think that's one thing that's been mentioned, like, oh, we're not guaranteed being paid.
There's various factors, right? Which is why, again, when you sort of say, okay, let's explore that, then we can dive into in writing perhaps in terms of some of the details. But I will say, based on my understanding, that we have had letters from unions saying, from a particular, when we asked the officer to come, my union said, here's the letter, I'm not coming, right? So we've had that, right? And we've had, again, the issue around pay or no pay, right? But I will say, in terms of where we are, where I am, in terms of looking at this, there's several options here, okay? One includes the subpoena, right, which is really the only space that we have that we can execute. And to be honest, I do anticipate figuring out a way to use that subpoena power again through the commission. Number two, the unions, the good news about the unions is that we are, the city, BPD in particular in the city, is going to go through negotiations with the unions in the summer for, next contract, right? And I've already plugged OPAT to be, to be in that space, and we can perhaps have language around officers participating in OPAT, this process. So that's number two. And number three, I think the commissioner's point of view, BPD's point of view in the past to me, and this has been that sort of, we are an outside agency, right, to provide oversight of them, right, to BPD. And we're separate from them, which is real, right? That's what we're here to do. So he can't force necessarily the officer to come here because it's a separate subject, right? So we gotta force the officer to come, right? Which again, which is why we are the ordinance, right? So I'm not saying, again, I'm not taking this out, no, I'm just saying that's really sort of some of the overall arching things around this. But I think we can do it certainly through the union, through the subpoena, try to do it through the union, maybe come up as we listed here, come up with other avenues, maybe it'd be some sort of policy again that suggests that perhaps BPD commissioner recommends that they come, right? So there's great spaces there that we can get, but ultimately, those are some of the things that I'm aware of around this space. But I think really, if we decide that's one of the things that's a priority, then we take it and try to flush it out and put some of this in writing and see what direction we go. And perhaps we can have more than different options, just like, the subpoena, we could have different things for different spaces.
Because I appreciate what you're saying, because I also think that I understand that the agency is separate from the police department, but I'm also wondering if there's a way to incorporate a duty to be present at these things as part of their job obligation, like just as if their duty is to go to court, which is a separate place and not part of, this is basically another tribunal.
Yeah, and I was feeling like it was
They're subpoenaed.
Well, sometimes they are.
Sometimes they are. They're not subpoenaed when they give someone a ticket. They show up voluntarily.
Or even
They're
at,
not-
even at motions, they're not always
If you
subpoenaed.
were to just said voluntarily, right?
Yeah.
But subpoena, like when I was a prosecutor, subpoena the officer, they have to show,
Yeah.
right? So that's
But they
voluntarily.
get voluntarily doesn't mean they don't get paid. They still get paid to show up to court on a parking ticket or anything. Like, that's what I think it's like, some of this is like, kind of like off paper. It's like, it's unclear, so my union said best case is like, I'm not gonna show up because I'm not gonna get paid, like, there's a chance I can't get paid or I can't clock this time. Depends, right? If my boss doesn't think that this is a work function, like a work-related function, then like, it's not expressly in their contract, so I think that's one of the things, I think
This
as a
is where the
committee,
contract
thinking about putting it in the contract,
Right.
but also I think in the meantime, we can't like spend the next 6 months or however long it's gonna take to, in the contract negotiations, you have to come up with a construct that's not just subpoenaing them all the time. Like, there has to be some middle ground between the contract and the subpoena that like facilitates collaboration, because they were doing it in the past. And I would expect that when they were doing it, they were getting paid. I noticed the difference once we had some sustained recommendations, that's when participation stopped. So like, maybe it's a fig leaf of a reason saying the pay, but that's just a trend I saw at the moment when we did some sustained rulings.
Okay.
So like, I think we have to figure out the in-between.
I think obviously this is, right,
Yeah.
so let's, I think.
This is, we all agree this is an important issue.
Right,
yeah.
Let's put this, proposed as number, yeah.
Are the officers made aware of the outcome of the hearings?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that's being shared with them,
Mhm.
and they don't see the benefit and there's so many sustained, complaints that it would hinder them or make them not want to come?
I think
Or
it
are
might
there's
almost
so
be the
many,
opposite, actually.
Maybe the
many
opposite.
that are unsustained.
Yeah, and there's the times that they've participated, for the most part, have actually went in their favor to provide context and things like that. And so I just,
So if that's communicated to everyone,
Mhm.
yeah,
that, I would hope that would help people to realize that maybe they should show up.
yeah.
And
In
only-
some instances where it was sustained, they did participate though, so I don't know. I mean, it's, I think it's,
The board,
I-
sure.
I think that the good thing is that the board itself stopped taking. We weren't saying insufficient evidence because like the officer wasn't here to counter what someone else said. Like that was one thing that was a hurdle, but like, we're like, if they're not gonna participate, how does it work in other places, in other tribunals? It's like, if you refuse to participate, we have to take whatever the other witness is saying as like, you're not refuting it. You're just like, take the evidence that's there, the police report, the camera footage and that witness statement, like, we have to take that for what it is because you're not putting up a refutation of it. I mean, I just think it's part of, it needs to be part of their job duty and their job in their contract. I don't know if that's gonna, but it has helped them.
Peter, our goal now is just to identify
Yes,
some
yes.
issues.
Yeah.
We all, I think, agree that this is a really important issue. It affects directly
Yeah.
our work and in my opinion, should be the top of the list of our policy priorities. I want to bring up one other that is on the potential list on one pager that the executive director put together. I'd actually put two things together. The one that says Trust Act Enforcement Protection of Immigrants in the City of Boston, along with the one right above it, BPD involvement in the joint task force with federal agencies. Given the posture of the federal government right now and the targeting of the ICE detentions, if this seems to me for us, if this, I hope the city and I hope BPD is doing it. I know they're paying attention to it, but I think we as a CRB have a role as civilian members of the community to make it clear what we think are the priorities in terms of protecting immigrant communities. And I would absolutely put that as number one, given the context of what's happening.
I also agree with the Trust Act enforcement. I'm not as familiar with the joint task force. I'm like familiar with the language.
There are, it's it's joint terrorist task force, a subject that came up after 9/11, that the federal government had these interagency sort of collaborations. And what that means now is that BPD is sitting together at the same table with Department of Homeland Security and federal folks with potential for information sharing. And it's exactly, I think, our role, we can have a role in making recommendations to be really careful and not just have open information sharing between municipal data about people who are living in our communities, sharing that with the federal government.
To the
right
extent
now.
it's not a national security, like that, for example.
Sure.
But the definition of national security is very.
Anyway, I think it's for us to look at, and that's why I put those two together.
Absolutely. So,
And the third one I would say that's come up, that's also related to things we've dealt with, is body cameras and the body camera policy. Just as an example, I know that the sergeants aren't required to wear body camera. And that's come up in cases that we've had, where we're like, where's the body camera? It's like, well, that's detectives and sergeants, they're not required. And
exactly.
we don't,
Is that a contract issue?
yes.
Yeah.
But
We have to
it's a policy question as well.
So, and that would fall under the various BPD rules and procedures.
I mean, sure, but or use of technology, including shot spotter, but I would just say body camera as a standalone.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I, like I said, I like to have it, like, you know, kind of hung on to something we've already
we're working,
seen, and
yeah.
that was something we've seen a few times was someone, there wasn't a
It's
different
not a
angle
glass,
because it was a sergeant, and like, we were like, oh, we can't really see over there. There's an officer there, no, like, you can't see because that person didn't have a body cam.
So it sounds like we got 4 so far.
I think that's 3,
That's,
because you
yeah,
combined them.
We combined the
I
BBD.
thought I heard body cameras too.
That is one, and then he combined the joint task force and
Correct.
trust act
Trust act,
together,
yes.
and then the OPAT process participation.
Yes, okay.
if so for me, there would actually be 2 streams of policies that we look at. One is like we're doing, these are priority issues for us. And the other would be, what are the BPD policies that they on a regular basis are reviewing and updating? And as part of that process, we get notice of that and we understand what their proposals are and we can put our own proposals, right? They're a big enough organization that they're going to be updating policies. And so that we get get the policy subcommittee and OPAT built into that process. So for me, that's sort of two streams. One, this list we just put in, and two is input into their ongoing policy review. That's how I would propose
So
it.
you're saying before they finalize their policy, that we have input, or we get
Yeah.
input, or that they tell us what their policy is, which is gonna be public anyway.
Yeah, their policies are public. They must have some process
Process,
of we're reviewing this policy. This policy is
Oh,
under
okay,
review.
policies,
And that
okay,
they let us know that this policy is under review and give us a chance to either give our own inputs or they say, these are our proposed things. What do you think? Right? That,
Yeah.
that as a policy
That'd be
subcommittee,
nice.
that we are doing that. I mean,
Do you think we need an ordinance for that?
an ordinance?
No, I'm just wondering.
Look, it says provide timely review
No,
of
no, for
existing or
for
proposed.
them to be compelled to share, like, to give the
It's a
update.
courtesy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think
It
like
should be a
that's the
courtesy.
thing, if Evandra, if you think OPAT and the police department will be able to get that that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, a courtesy.
And I think that starts with like the key question
Yeah.
of like, what is the approval process? And then, maybe through that understanding, we can kind of figure out
Yeah.
what is possible.
Yeah, 'cause it's the process that we're just not
Right.
clear about.
Yeah,
And maybe there's, executive director, maybe there's, I mean, I understand, I really appreciate that the BBD and OPAT have ongoing communications on a range of issues. But maybe there's something where either the chair or some member of our body is also having some interactions of, this is why it's important to CRB, specifically us as a body. It's a separate voice, it's a related voice to yours, but some of that dialogue that can help push forward, some of our things.
I'm welcome to entertain that. I think however, I think the ordinance really anticipates and contemplates the OPAT administration doing the legwork. In terms of, again, which is why I sort of said in this committee that the work, we should do research and sort of then
Yeah.
put in front of the decision. So, but I'm certainly welcome to have the chair involved and discuss, meet with the commission. I think it's important.
So it sounds like I don't know if we need to vote on that. Do we need to vote on our top three?
No, I think we just,
Okay.
we hear you. It's obviously just the process, officers' participation in the process. Then you brought up the Trust Act and the task force stuff, which is together. And then we went to
Body camera.
body cameras, and then lastly, you mentioned the stuff we just discussed about rules and procedures and what their process is and how we can, and our CRB can partake in that process of changes to the rules.
So I'm just thinking as concretely as possible, if the policy subcommittee wanted to meet 5 weeks from today, making up whatever that is, does looking at your thing, this would be OPAT staff conducts substantive research and drafts and submit to the subcommittee for review and input. Is that enough time?
Yes, I think we can sort of start the due diligence, but realistically try to flesh out all these various issues in 5 weeks, a short time. But we certainly, particularly in terms of order, right, in terms of something we identified, we can start digging some of this, right? But we won't have a thorough sort of work on all of it, right? So the idea is to sort of, what I anticipated was sort of, pick one or two and then sort of really drive it, right? Sort of, and then move on to the next one, and kind of slowly building out, right, as we're going.
Do you think it makes sense if it's 3 now and then you all have what you're working with for a year?
I think we can do light digging, perhaps in some of these stuff to just kind of put stuff together.
Right.
But, about which we won't have an in-depth space in each. But if you want to focus on just 3 or 2 and say, okay, let's dive on these 2, then that we could. Think about it.
For me, the first two that we mentioned.
Which,
The joint antitrust and trust act.
in the,
Officer participation.
okay, all right, so those 2, then. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do we want to find a date?
Yeah, but I don't know if we need to do that.
Yeah.
But if there is a meeting of the subcommittee, the plan is that would be a public Like, we have
Right,
to
so-
follow public meeting law for that.
That's sort of where we're, like, I gotta go back to.
Okay.
Like that, so perhaps we don't pick a day right away, so I can dig in terms of what the process of the meeting will be.
Okay, I propose about 5 weeks from now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Shouldn't take much time.
Who wants to graduate first?
Where you going next year?
You at Boston.
So,
So-
how do we?
Yeah, let's go.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone to have so much interest in it that we're
Overflowing.
pushing people away. That's really appreciated.
Good job putting it together.
Josh, it's hard, it's loaded.
It only took 14 months.
So,
I feel like 20.
Talking to you
Since
about it. before
the
that.
beginning, yeah. I don't know.
so our next agenda item is complaint summary and disposition. The CRB will review the cases listed on the agenda in an executive session. Would anyone like to enter into executive session? Make a motion.
Motion there to.
Anybody second that motion? You have 2 seconds. Now we'll be going into executive session.
11, 10.
It's 11, 9, 11, 10.
Got it. They put the script.
You only got the script.
No, but.
It's very good that.
He has it, that's
To
what he's
get
reading.
into the correct session, like, ordinance.
Yeah, it's okay.
She said something.
Oh, I guess we're supposed to have a vote.
Yeah, you have to say all in favor.
It wasn't clear to me,
Like, we're now.
I was about to just tell you.
Yeah.
I was like, I know, I put it in there.
In accordance with General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 1, 21A 7, and Sections 22F and G, this executive session is being called in order to review and approve past executive session minutes and to discuss the complaints brought against a Boston Police Department public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. This applies to case numbers 287, 395, 295, 345, 262, 332, 393, and 398. The BPD employees named in any of these cases retain the right to have this discussion in the public meeting rather than the executive session. Are there any officers present who would like their case to be heard in the public meeting? I'm looking towards the the public area, so to speak. I did not see anybody.
There is one person I don't know.
There's one person, but they did not raise their hands. We will now hold the roll call vote to enter into the executive session. When your name is called, please tell me how you are voting. Amari Perez. Bernard Fitzgerald. Diafort Florissant. Joshua Dankoff.
In favor.
Natalie Carruthers is not here. Peter Alvarez.
In favor.
Reginald Smalls.
In favor?
Tanisha De Leon.
In favor.
The time is now 3:56, 3:57. And we are back in the public session. The CRB will vote on the disposition of the cases presented today to the board. I will read the case number and the recommended disposition for that case. We will then hold a roll call vote for each number to adopt disposition. Does the board have any questions about the procedure? Okay. All right, so this is gonna be
A doozy.
a little time consuming, but get through this. So let's begin in the matter of case 345. The recommendation, I believe, was unfounded.
Mhm.
And that was also the OPAT's recommended disposition was unfounded. When your name is called, please state how you're voting. This is for Oklahoma.
Mhm.
Oklahoma. There's two counts for Oklahoma, right?
3.
Yes.
Were there three counts?
You want 2?
I thought it was,
Oh, maybe I messed it up.
2.
Okay,
what was the first one was 102, section 3 conduct,
okay, that's my fault.
and then what was the second one?
Second one was, neglect of duty, unreasonable judgment, rule 102.4.
This is soccer at the moment.
Right. Okay,
We'll talk it next.
and
Okay,
that was also, the recommendation was also unfounded, so for, rule 103, section 102, section 3 conduct. Mr. Perez, how do you, vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
unfounded.
I also vote unfounded. For, the second count, rule 102, section 4, neglect of duties. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Founded.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
I will also vote unfounded. Okay, we're moving on to case 295. Do we say the officer's name? David Hale, for case 295. The OPAT's recommendation was unfounded for 102, section 3, which is conduct. And then the other 102, section 4, neglect of duty, also OPAT's recommendation was unfounded. 102, section 9, respectful treatment, also unfounded. There's also, we'll go to the second officer afterwards. Mr. Perez, how do you find?
Unfounded.
102 section. Mr. Fitzgerald,
Unfounded.
Mr. Florissant,
Unfounded.
Mr. Small,
Unfounded.
Ms. De Leon,
Unfounded.
I will also be doing unfounded. For count to 102, section 4, neglect of duty, Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
I also vote unfounded. Count 3, 102, section 9, respectful treatment. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
I skipped Mr. Fitzgerald.
Unfounded.
Thank you. Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Unfounded.
I also vote unfounded. Look at us, we're really all just like so agreeable until the end. Okay, for officer, the second officer in case 295, Sergeant Timothy Paul Coughlin, 3 counts, conduct, neglect of duty, and respectful treatment. I have not sustained for them as the OPAT recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
I vote not sustained for rule 102, section 3 conduct.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
I also vote not sustained. For, section 102. Rule 102, section 4, neglected duty. See, like, Mr. Perez, he's on it.
He's the man.
He's pulling up the statutes, the law. So for, count number two, how do you vote, Mr. Perez? Not sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, how
Not
do you vote?
sustained.
Ms. Flores, Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
And I also vote not sustained. Count two, rule 102, section 9, respectful treatment. Mr. Perez, how do you vote? Not sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, how
Not
do you vote?
sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
I also vote not sustained. Okay, so we're moving on to case 398 involving Officer Kava Phillips. The OPAT recommendation is sustained on count one, conduct unbecoming, sustained as to count two, neglect of duty, sustained as to count two, or three, 102, section 12, sleeping on duty. Do we want to include the recommended discipline? After? Okay. So for count one, conduct unbecoming, well, how do you vote, Mr. Perez? Sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
I also vote sustained. For count two, rule 102, section 4, neglect of duty. Mr. Perez, how do you vote? Sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
I also vote sustained. For count three, section, rule 102, section 12, sleeping on duty. Mr. Perez, how do you vote? Sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
I also vote sustained. Okay, moving on to case 287 involving Officer Tom Sullivan. The OPAT recommendation is not sustained on count one of violation of rule 102, section 9. Count two, neglect of duty, rule 102, section 4, the OPAT recommendation, I believe, was sustained. For count three, the OPAT recommendation was sustained for rule 102, section 20, failure to identify or self-ID. So let's go through it. For count one, Mr. Perez, how do you vote? Not sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
The chair also votes not sustained. For count two, rule 102, section 4, neglect of duty. Mr. Perez, how do you vote? Sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
The chair also votes sustained. For count three, rule 102, section 20, failure to self-identify. Mr. Perez, how do you vote? Sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
And the chair also votes sustained. Case, 287, this is involving Officer, Ricardo Arico. The OPAT recommendation was not sustained, I believe, for count one. Sustained for count two, neglect of duty. And, sustained for, self-ID.
No.
Yes.
I'll be in call.
No, no.
We were just discussing what
You're talking about the
the
recommendation.
disciplinary actions.
Yeah.
He
Oh.
missed it when you asked.
Got it.
I gotta do that to the vote. You're good.
What?
You're good.
Okay,
Do an excellent job.
thank you. For count one, respectful treatment, Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Um. Missing people. Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
The chair also votes not sustained. For count, to Rule 102, Section 4, neglect of duty, Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
The chair also votes sustained. For count 3, self-identification. I feel like we did that already. We did for the,
For the first officer.
yeah. Self-ID, the OPAT recommendation is sustained. For Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote? Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
The chair also votes sustained. We add the additional charge, section 102, rule 102, section 8, directives and orders from superiors. There was no OPAT recommendation because they didn't have, it wasn't part of the original plan. But we're gonna vote on it anyway. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote? Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
And the chair also votes sustained. Okay,
Did we do that rule that just sustained? Okay.
it was rule 102, section 8, directives and orders from superiors.
Thank you.
And that was, do you want the officer name?
There we go. I got it.
There we go. Moving on to case 395 concerning, Michael Aziz. I don't know if I wrote down the OPAT recommendation.
Who secretary?
I feel like there's another chair in the wings. You know, there's a co-chair who's doing a great job.
Could you also repeat the case number?
This is 395, I believe. So for rule 102, section 4, neglect of duty. Mr. Perez, how do you find?
I have here sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you find?
What was sustaining that he neglected his duty?
That was,
I'm lost. on this one.
No, I think it's.
This is the last case that we reviewed, correct?
Oh,
No,
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 that's just,
no.
395. That's the second part of.
Oh, the
387.
second one,
Yes.
okay.
Oh, that's why I was thinking
Yeah.
the number was right.
Yeah.
This was the one that you guys were talking about with both
Yeah.
the restraining order and the probate court order.
Okay.
The
Yes.
directive to arrest her.
Yeah.
We had said further investigation on this one because
And I think,
I know, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just saying why we had, thinking, I'm gonna
Understand.
let you guys, because I know you guys deliberated on this. We had, further investigation on this one because, according to the body one camera, there was some other officers on scene, right? And although the complainant,
I think one thing we're worried about is the public.
okay, oh, yes, okay. All right, so why don't you just.
Okay.
Just say what they did.
I appreciate you though. Mr. Perez has voted, Mr. Fitzgerald.
I was gonna say not sustained.
Mr. Forrest,
It can be that. Sustained.
yes.
So
Yeah. And it's sustained.
So you're down with six?
Yes.
6 people, so if this one person is not in agreement, it's no finding.
Yeah.
So there's no even a need to go further, really, because you have.
Yeah.
6 people in the room and it's one person.
I need it for the numbers.
Huh?
I need it for the numbers.
Okay.
That's the only reason. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Small,
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon,
Sustained.
and the chair votes sustained, but no finding.
Right,
But no
because we
finding.
have one assistant.
For count 2, conduct, rule 102, section 3 involving conduct. OPAT's recommendation was, not sustained. This is
It's 395.
correct.
I already have one.
It was just, further investigation into.
Just for 395. Why do I have 2 for Mr. Michael Aziz? Because
Did you guys add a rule?
there's a second page. There's no.
Something's off.
Same one.
You wanna know what's interesting though? When she was evaluating the rules, she evaluated them under 2. For the applicable rules, she gave us 2 rules, why I wrote down 2. I think we were supposed to evaluate this under 2 rules. Maybe, Madam Investigator,
Well, you guys did say neglect of duty and oral, was the neglect of duty sustained.
yes, and then did you also have an evaluation under conduct?
No conduct.
Okay.
I mean, the conduct, there's 2 rules here. I'm just intervening because I was got a little confused on the 2.
I thought there were 2 rules
And
too,
there's 2
but then
rules listed here.
Can we give Diana a page number?
2.
Oh, I see what you're saying,
And I think when you were explaining it to us, you asked us to evaluate under both.
Yeah,
Oh,
and yes, and we said, OPAT is sending it for further investigation,
On
but you
both.
guys decided to do, yes, but you guys decided to do conduct and neglect of duty. Yes, you're right.
Okay. And your position, OPAT's position was further investigation
Yes.
on both,
Correct.
and we decided something else.
Yes.
Okay. Which we'll talk about right now. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Florissant, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
And I also vote sustained. And so that was count 1, and so count 2. No, we're done with. We're done with- we're done with that one. Going on to Taylor Green for case 393.
Yeah.
Which, Count one, Rule 102, Section 4, neglect of duty. I believe the OPAT recommendation, not, I thought it was further investigation.
No, it's
not-
not.
That's just.
You're right. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Forrestant, how do you vote?
That's sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
And I also vote not sustained. Moving on to, James Hosang. I think James is the first name. Oh, so James. Yeah. For case 393, the OPAT recommendation was not sustained. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Forrestant, how do you
Not
vote?
sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
The chair also votes not sustained. And then we have, Miss Stephanie Sullivan, Officer Stephanie Sullivan for case 393, detective. My apologies. The OPAT recommendation is exonerated, for count one, neglect of duty. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Exonerated.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Exonerated.
Mr. Forrestant, how do you vote?
Exonerated.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Exonerated.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Exonerated.
And the chair also votes exonerated. Okay, moving on, case 262 with Officer Mark Marone. And count one is section 102, section 4, neglected duty. The OPAT recommendation was sustained. How do you vote, Mr. Perez?
Not sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Forrestant, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
And I also vote not sustained. And for Mr. Mark Marone, count two, 102, section 9, respectful treatment, the OPAT recommendation was sustained. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Forrestant, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
And I also vote sustained. We have finally, count three, rule 304, non-lethal force. Mr. Perez, oh, the recommendation was sustained. Mr. Perez, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Forrestant, how do you vote?
Not sustained.
Mr. Small, how do you vote?
Sustained.
Ms. De Leon, how do you vote?
Sustained.
And the chair votes sustained. That's it. Yeah, that was it. Unless I'm missing something. Okay,
Oh,
You need to go back.
Recommendations on the system.
yeah, do we want to go through
Do the
those?
disciplines,
Okay,
sorry.
all right, it's like hard to flip back to the run of show.
That's what you wanna show. You put
What?
disciplines?
Oh, it's not in the
No,
run of
no,
show.
no,
Oh,
So we want to put the disciplines on the record.
no. Mm-hmm,
Okay,
and just say them out loud for any sustained cases you have.
Do we have to vote on the sustaining, like on the, or have we already automatically done that? You know,
Like you just have
So
to
it's-
say it on the record as.
and that's it.
Yeah,
are we all gonna say it on the record?
yeah, if you say what the discipline is and just say.
Okay,
Do you agree? Let's just do it, do you agree?
okay, for Miss Kiva Phillips, the CRB recommends 5-day suspension. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
I agree.
Mr. Forasant, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Small, do you agree?
I agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you agree?
I agree.
And I, the chair, also agree. Yes. Third person's always a weird thing. For count two, we're asking for a 5-day suspension to run concurrently with the original suspension for count one. This is for neglect of duty. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
Agree.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Forasant, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Small, do you agree?
I agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you agree?
I agree.
And I agree. And finally, for count three, 102, section 12, sleeping on duty. We our recommendation is training and for both the call taker and the supervisor, and potentially some investigation on behalf of the police department to figure out what can be done about sleeping on duty. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
I agree.
Yes, I do.
Mr. Fitzgerald agrees. Mr. Forasant, do you agree? Mr. Small, do you
I
agree?
agree.
Ms. De Leon, do
I
you
agree.
And the chair agrees. Okay. The next is Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Tom Sullivan, for case 287. It was a sustained allegation of neglect of duty. The recommendation is a 15-day suspension. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
Agree.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
I agree.
Mr. Forasant, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Small, do you agree?
I agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you agree?
I agree.
And the chair agrees. For count three, Mr. Tom Sullivan, we have a sustained allegation of failing to ID themselves. Our recommendation is a 5-day suspension that runs concurrently with the original 15-day suspension, as well as training that was outlined in the recommendation. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
Agree.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Forasant, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Small, do you agree?
I agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you agree?
I agree.
The chair agrees. Moving on to Richard Erico, for Officer Richard Erico. We have a sustained allegation of neglect of duty, and the recommendation is 15 days of suspension. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
Agree.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
I agree.
Mr. Forasant, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Small, do you agree?
I agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you agree?
Yes.
The chair agrees. Count two involves self-identification. We have a sustained allegation of failing to self-ID. I'm sorry, this has been a long day.
It's okay.
The recommended discipline is 5 days suspension with training to run concurrent with the 15 days. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
Agree.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Forasant, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Small, do you agree?
I agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you agree?
Agree.
The chair agrees. This was the additional charge from Officer Richard Erico that was sustained, section 102, rule 102, section 8, directives and orders from superiors. And we are asking, the recommended discipline is 5 days from and after the 15-day suspension. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
Agree.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Forasant, do you agree?
agree.
Mr. Small, do you agree?
I agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you agree?
I agree.
And the chair agrees.
This was not part of that, so I'm not sure. Everybody.
Oh, yeah, no, we can't do anything with that.
395 has a sustain.
But we have one
No
not sustained,
finding.
so there's no finding.
Oh, that's right. That's your project agreed. That's the project agreed, if there was no other.
Weren't there two rule violations for 395?
Yeah.
There were. People's vote, there's a couple votes that kind of changed along the way.
I thought one of them was not sustained.
Yeah,
No, so I thought it was neglect of duty, 520,
yes,
conduct, all agreed,
yes.
and
So
so.
there was one rule that I agreed on.
Conduct.
Exactly.
For which one are we talking about?
395,
395,
conduct was agreed.
Did you go over that?
Everyone, vote in the, I think a unanimous vote for.
There was a unanimous vote for conduct. But we don't have a recommendation.
Mhm.
Would you like me to mute?
What?
Would you like to go into exec?
I move to go into executive session. Does anybody second my motion?
Stephanie,
Okay, we are now moving into executive session.
Third.
I'm back in the public session. So for Mr. Michael Aziz for case number 395, rule 102, section 3, conduct unbecoming an officer. The recommended discipline is an oral reprimand. Mr. Perez, do you agree?
Agree.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
I agree.
Mr. Florissant, do you agree?
agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you
I
agree?
agree.
And the chair agrees. Oh, Mr. Small,
I
I'm
agree.
sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Small. Okay. Am I missing anything?
Did we agree on 262?
393, and then two.
You're right, we didn't actually agree on 262 respectful treatment because the vote changed.
Yep.
My recommendation is oral reprimand. Unless you want to go into an executive session.
Sure.
Okay.
That's what we have.
I think we mentioned it, yeah.
No,
Hold on.
okay.
Mr. Perez, do you agree?
I agree.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree?
I agree.
Mr. Florissant, do you agree?
I agree.
Mr. Small, do you agree?
I agree.
Ms. De Leon, do you agree?
I agree.
And the chair agrees. And I think that concludes the vote. And let me go back. Thank you all very much. The Civilian Review Board has no more cases before today. We will move on to other business.
332, couldn't be presented due to,
Correct. Case number 332, which was scheduled to be presented today, is going to be presented at the next meeting. That being said, the Civilian Review Board has no more cases remaining. We will move on to other business. Does anybody have any additional business or outstanding questions to ask?
I do. Just curious, why did we not do the recommendations at the time that we do the vote? Why are they broken up?
That's a very good question that I think we can work on after
Sure.
the public meeting. Is there a motion for, is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Florissant,
Motion to adjourn.
Does anybody second his motion?
Second.
Okay, we are now, is everyone in favor of adjourning?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct,
What
okay.
time is it?
Thank you all for attending. The time is now, 4:34. The meeting is now adjourned.
That was a big one. What do you guys need out of this?